Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 36 of the BadMotoGP podcast. Keelin had the idea that we rename it to the BaldMotoGP podcast after he cuts his hair as well. So, hello, Keelin, and did you enjoy the races?
Leo, hello once again, my friend, and hello to everybody else watching episode 36 of the Bad MotoGP podcast. We are coming to you in the immediate aftermath of one of the great races in the calendar. It is, of course, the Assen TT from the Netherlands. And I gotta say, this weekend was phenomenal. MotoGP, I don't want to give anything away. You've probably seen the races, but if you haven't, I don't want to give it away. Moto 2 and Moto 3 was mega. It was absolutely topsy turvy from beginning to end. We laughed, we cried, we were angry at some very familiar enemies in the stewards. Looking forward to breaking it all down, and yeah, let's get straight into it.
With Pecco, I was very, very impressed that he turned it around so quickly because it didn't look particularly good on Friday. It looked okay on Saturday. In the sprint, it looked like Marco Bezzecchi had a lot more pace, but with the medium rear tire he used in the race and also Marco Bezzecchi used in the race, it looked like Pecco was much more comfortable on it, and Marco Bezzecchi had some problems keeping up the pace. And I believe Pecco is now the first rider who won back-to-back Assen GPs since Valentino Rossi. So very, very cool that he emulates his mentor there.
Mm-hmm.
But again, a very, very Pecco-like performance. He got into the lead early after he overtook Brad Binder and then never looked back. He was able to adjust his pace a little bit. When Marco Bezzecchi came, there was like a time where Marco made up 4/10 of a second in a single lap, and Pecco adjusted his pace. So super, super classic Pecco performance. Very, very fast, very, very tidy. Not too much happened there at the front with him, but he's just better, faster than everybody else. And that's why he's the world champion, and that's why he's leading the Grand Prix. And there's really not much else to talk about there with Pecco. He was just his usual self, like better than everybody, faster than everybody. Didn't drink before the race, so he didn't crash, and everything was perfect for him and a perfect way to end the first half of the season.
Yeah, I completely agree, Leo. Just a typical Pecco Bagnaia performance. Got out front in the opening lap, never looked like giving it up from that point. You made a great point about the tire choice as well. When he used the medium rear tire, he seemed to have a lot more comfort and control and feel with using that. I think on Friday you saw that he was very uncomfortable. He couldn't get it together. And it just seemed like it might be a bad weekend for Pecco. But I heard, I was watching, of course, the BT commentary of the race, and they noted that Pecco was using Marco Bezzecchi's data. And I believe Bezzecchi was using the medium rear all weekend, and I think Pecco's engineer switched that for his bike, and it seemed to give him much more comfort and feeling. So yeah, Pecco obviously took that information, had a brilliant race. Like I said, got to the front, never looked like giving it back again, and all round great race from Pecco Bagnaia. But what this performance also shows, and what the first half of the season shows, is the value in having multiple bikes on the grid and having multiple teams. Because, like you said, where one falls short, the other will pick up the slack, and you can share the data and you can use it to improve your race. So, credit to Ducati as well for having those resources and using them. But Pecco Bagnaia, like you said, there's a reason he's the reigning world champion, and there's a reason he'll probably retain that title this year as well. Just a brilliant race, looked very comfortable, never got out of sync, and yeah, first rider to win back-to-back races at Assen since Lord Valentino. So if that doesn't tell you something, I guess nothing will.
I mean, I don't know about the tires because on the official MotoGP broadcast, they didn't talk about this particularly. But Marco Bezzecchi said that he was feeling much more comfortable with the soft tire, and Pecco was feeling more comfortable with the medium tire. So I don't know, but I guess somewhere along the line that Pecco used the data of the other Ducatis, which could have helped him, should be true. And why not? And also, we now head into the summer break, and this is Pecco Bagnaia's biggest test to not fly to Ibiza and not crash car again. I mean, if you're Ducati, you lock him in a cage where there's a gym, there's a kitchen, and maybe where you have a little motocross track or like a mini bike track where he can train. But God
Give him a
forbid,
unicycle.
yeah, don't let him party. And if you let him party, make sure there are a couple of taxi drivers there who take him home, because a second time in a row, this would be absolutely hilarious. But nothing what Ducati wants. So yeah, the easy part of the season is over. Now the hard part of the season starts for Pecco and Ducati, and I hope they manage well.
Oh god, yeah. Imagine if it's 2 years in a row, Pecco beats himself.
I mean, at what point do you penalize him if you're MotoGP? Like, if he indeed drunk drives again, what's like the consequence there? Because last year there were none.
It's an interesting question, to be fair. I mean, I don't really know how far you can regulate what somebody does off the track. I think as long as he's only harming himself, MotoGP probably won't do anything to him because there's no real effect on them. It's a reflection on Ducati and on Pecco. Now, if he was to drunk drive again and he was to hurt somebody else, that's a very different conversation. And that very quickly goes from joking and memeing to a very serious discussion. But somehow I have a feeling Paco won't be allowed to be as unbelievable as last year. I think they'll probably chain him to Gigi Dall'Igna for 5 weeks and get him back to Silverstone.
I think every organization that promotes a sport has every right to penalize a rider for off-track or like off-field misbehavior. The
Mm-hmm.
NFL does it better than anybody else.
Very true.
If you have some, I mean, we discussed it a lot on the podcast last year with Pecco. The NFL, when there are some criminal charges or some misbehavior things, they penalize the players with game suspensions. So why not should MotoGP do something? Because it's indeed very, very bad PR for Ducati, for MotoGP, and also for all the sponsors involved. So yeah, last year I would have suspended him for Silverstone, but if it happened again, I would do the same thing. Like, one race should be a fine, and yeah, nothing else. So let's hope nothing happens. Even though the memes would be insane, but yeah,
Yeah, I
I
think
mean, we
with
can't. I'm sorry, we can't have more memes dying. So a lot of memes has been dying recently, so we can't afford to lose another one.
exactly, we need the memes to keep going. Yeah, I mean, look, you make a brilliant point, and I think definitely in this area, the NFL are really the shining light in terms of the example. Like, for example, the I can't remember the name of the person, but there was a kid who was drafted by the Las Vegas Raiders, and he was caught. I think he was drink driving in Las Vegas, and I think he got a manslaughter charge, so vehicular manslaughter. He killed someone with the car, and then he was immediately dropped by the team and he was dropped by the league. So I think there is a clear. Now, obviously, I don't think Pecco's ever going to do that. I think he can be an idiot, but I don't think he's a dangerous idiot. But if something like that ever happened, I think the examples are there. But I mean, if they were going to punish him and make an example of this, they would have done it last year. I think that's where I'm coming from. And I think I do remember us discussing this, and we both said if you're going to punish him, suspend him for the next race. Take the points off him. Don't let him gain from that. The problem is if you weren't going to punish him last year, you can't do it this year because you can't be inconsistent, even though MotoGP is the definition of inconsistent. So I think you kind of just have to trust that he won't be an asshole again, and kind of play it that way. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But I have a feeling Ducati won't be letting him out of their sight for 5 weeks.
Hopefully. So let's go back to Assen and back to the race because Marc Bezzecchi had an incredible performance over the weekend. He showed why he's a very, very unique prospect. He's very fast, but he's also very calculated in his approach. He rarely does something stupid. I mean, he has the occasional crash, of course, but it's not like a danger to somebody else. And he's very calculated. And this weekend showed his upside, and he was incredible. But it also showed that there's still a level to Pecco. So he's like the next best thing at Ducati. Like Enea Bastianini right now still a little bit injured, so he's not 100% healthy yet. But right now, Marc Bezzecchi is the next best thing at Ducati. He is very, very good.
Yeah, I completely agree. And if you're any other manufacturer in the grid, you have got to be very, very jealous of the level of talent that Ducati have at their disposal. Because, I mean, even if you just break it down rider by rider, you have the incumbent world champion, Pecco Bagnaia, arguably the best, well, not arguably, best rider on the grid. You have Enea Bastianini, who's a beast, injured at the moment, but still very good. You then have the second best rider in the world in Marco Bezzecchi. You've got one of the most stable riders in Luca Marini. You've got Jorge Martin, who's spectacular. You have Johan Zarco, who's normally captain consistency too. And then you've got the Grassini team. You've Alex Marquez, who's been very, very good this year. And your only weak link has been Fabio Di Gianantonio. So to hit on 7 out of 8 riders is unbelievable. That never happens. But to bring it back to Marco Bezzecchi, I mean, this guy is phenomenally good. He is so gifted as a rider, and he's on the perfect bike. He's in the perfect environment to thrive. He's among his mentors' team. He's part of the VR46 squad. He's doing amazing things in that Ducati, and he is really getting the best out of the great equipment. So massive respect to Marco Bezzecchi. Do I think he'll keep a title challenge going in the second part of the season? If I'm honest, I don't think he will, but I don't think that was ever the point of this year. I think the point of this year was to get him going and developing on this Ducati machinery, and he has been, I mean, aside from Pecco, he's been my favorite rider this year so far. So I tip my hat to Marco Bezzecchi because he's been spectacular.
He's really, really good, and it offers a little bit of a problem for Ducati. Like, what do you do with your riders? I mean, if they want to maintain, okay, cool. But as soon as somebody or even two rookies should step in, like Tony Abolino is a big talking point, Pedro Acosta is a big talking point, then you start to have some issues, I would say. But I mean, we still don't know what will happen with Jorge Martin. I guess we will find out over the summer break. At the beginning of the season, there has been a rumor that he already signed with Yamaha. I hope for him this is not true because this would be a very, very bad career choice.
Agreed.
And also, Joan Zarco, there are retirement rumors. With Fabio Di Giannantonio, there are World Superbike rumors. And there's a lot that could happen with Ducati. And like Marc Marquez is also a thing that could happen. Still unlikely, but could happen. But I think Ducati needs to be careful that they should only put riders in place which fit the whole philosophy of the manufacturer, because there's no real reason to add more talent to their rider lineup except taking it away from somebody else. And if you do that, I think you should focus on young riders. And if I'm Ducati, I'm not signing Marc Marquez because it wouldn't make sense for me. And Pedro Acosta is a rider I would sign, and also Tony Abolino is a rider I would sign. So let's say Joan Zarco gets into retirement, and Jorge Martin goes to Yamaha, and Fabio Gian Antonio goes to World Superbike. I would sign Pedro and Tony Abolino, and I would try everything to get Frankie over to Ducati to develop the bike a little bit from a more experienced point of view. and then keep my rider lineup this way, because then you have enough pieces you could move um, in order to be always competitive, even if somebody moves or somebody retires.
Yeah, it's a very very interesting discussion, the whole Ducati situation, because on the one hand, it's the best kind of problem to have. You know, which of the best talent do we pick to ride our best bike? You know, I mean, if you're Yamaha, for example, you would kill to have that kind of problem at the moment. But with Ducati, it's a very interesting discussion because it depends on what approach you take to it. Now, I'm just going to give you my point of view based on what I've heard and what I've seen. The first thing I'm going to say is I've heard the Frankie rumors. I've heard they're relatively strong. A move potentially to Grassini, I think I heard, could be in the cards for Frankie. And if he gets that opportunity, I think he should jump to take it, because I think Morbidelli on a Ducati would bring him to where he deserves to be. I think he'd be a brilliant addition to Ducati as well. Now, as far as Pramac goes, this comes back to the Pedro Acosta situation. Now, I've seen reports. Now, bear in mind, these are just reports, so take them with a pinch of salt. I've seen reports that KTM will promote Pedro Acosta, so they'll have to dump somebody. But if there's any hesitation with Pedro Acosta from KTM, you jump and you try and get him for Ducati, bring him in for Jorge Martin if he's going to Yamaha, and if Johan Zarco retires, give him a test rider role and bring in Tony Arbolino. Though I would actually make the exact same moves that you would make. Now, again, this depends on whether Jorge Martin leaves. I don't know if he will or not. I think he would be a fool to leave to try and prove some kind of point. You're already on the best bike and one of the best teams in the grid. But if he leaves and if Johan Zarco retires, a team of Pedro Acosta and Tony Arbolino would be the next generation of the next generation, because you would literally have the past, the present, and the future in Ducati. You know, you would have Pecco Bagnaia, reigning world champion. You would have the future of Marco Bezzecchi and Luca Marini, and you would have the future off of the future in Pedro Acosta. That's your lineup sorted for the next 10, 15 years if you want. If they did that, they'd be unbeatable.
Yeah. And we need to talk about KTM. You already mentioned them with Pedro, because Brad Binder did the impossible. He managed to get two penalties in the same corner for track limit violations.
Ugh.
To clarify, on Saturday, it was a problem of accumulating track limit violations. So I don't know the exact number in the sprint race, but if you have a certain number of track limit violations, you get a penalty, a long lap penalty. And because it was so late in the race, he got the 3-second penalty.
Mm-hmm.
And today he had the track limit violations in the last lap. And we should also mention that Jorge Martin got the same violation in the same corner without a penalty. So Jean Zarco cut it's not really a chicane, it's more like a straight where the track goes from left to right. So I think that this rule is incredibly stupid, to demote someone one position for track limits violation in the last lap. And I thought about it a lot, because what do you do? If you don't penalize it, everybody will do it to gain an advantage. So where do you draw the line? And I think you should add a time penalty for track limit violations in the last lap, because demoting somebody one place is a little bit harsh. For example, Aleix Espargaro never was going to overtake Brad Binder. He was too good, and Aleix wasn't in a position to ever challenge Brad Binder really for P3. So to demote him one place for this couple of centimeters track limits violation, I think is a little bit stupid. But if you go and say, okay, I will give you a penalty of 1/10 of a second, this should be fair, because Yes, you gained a little bit of an advantage, I would say, because you accelerated a little bit faster and therefore got a little bit wider. But also, it was so marginally thin that you don't really get a tenth of a second of an advantage, so it would still be a penalty. And if Aleix really manages to be close to him, I don't remember how close Aleix at the end was to Brad Binder, but one tenth of a second penalty could be appropriate. Maybe you do a quarter of a second, or maybe you do 2/10 whatsoever. There should be an agreement on what's fair and what's not fair. And also, what I don't understand, like, why didn't Jorge Martin get a penalty? I mean, nobody was behind Jorge Martin. He didn't gain any advantage, and neither did Brad Binder. So why do you penalize one and don't penalize the other? I mean, it would be ridiculous to demote Jorge Martin one position because there was nobody behind him. It was like a quarter mile where nobody was behind him. And I think that the rule in itself, they realized they can't pull this off because it would lead to such a backlash that they couldn't afford to pull it off. But with Brad Binder, it was okay because Aleix was directly behind him. So yeah, I think that they really should change this rule in a way that riders don't take advantage of it in the last lap and gain a real advantage. But then again, don't demote somebody one position because what the hell?
Yeah, I mean, this discussion of penalties and track limits it's such a ball ache of a discussion at this point because nearly every other episode going back to last season we've had to discuss this, and everybody else has had to discuss this, and everybody is rightfully fed up of discussing this as well. Brad Binder's just the latest victim of a ridiculous BS rule, as you said. And I think, see, my solution to this whole issue would normally be just leave it to the discretion of the stewards. You know, if somebody hasn't gained an advantage, you know, don't punish them for something they haven't gained. But the stewards are such idiots that I don't trust them with the discretion to apply the rule as and when they seem appropriate. With Brad Binder, right, what we have to look at is this chicane, which isn't really a chicane, it's a straight with a slight meandering bend, is more what it is. What we have to look at in both situations, both in the sprint race and in the main race, has Brad Binder gained anything by going onto the green area by 2 centimeters? No, he hasn't. You can't punish somebody for not gaining anything. Going out wide, not gaining any time, and then punishing them a position when they didn't gain anything to begin with. It makes no sense to anybody. Like you said, Alicia Spargaro was never going to catch Brad Binder today. So to throw away that podium and to throw away that position, I would be pissed off. I am pissed off, and I didn't even race. You know, we have to start using some common sense here. I mean, this is not like, I'm trying to think of an example, like Valentino and Marc Marquez when Valley cut across the track that year that he won. That's a different type of discussion. This is following the turn of the track, going onto the green by less than a tenth, by that much, and punishing him. You know, it makes no sense whatsoever. And this, I wish I could give a clear answer because it's part of such a wider issue with the sport. You know, the rules are bullshit, and they're not even applying the rules correctly. You know, we have to start doing something about this because riders are getting affected now. Riders are getting annoyed, and rightfully so. And I'm sure we'll talk about this as well with Moto 2 because a certain issue with a certain rider was very similar and nothing happened. But like you said as well, Jorge Martin, why wasn't he penalized? Well, it's okay for Brad Binder because he had a rider behind him that he gets punished, but Jorge Martin doesn't. You know, the stewards do themselves no favors whatsoever. And look, I understand refereeing a sport or judging a sport or maintaining a sport can be difficult, but every decision the stewards are being given, they are messing it up. every single decision, no matter how big, no matter how small, they don't get it right. And that is a profound problem. Something has to be done here. Scrap the rule, get rid of the stewards, bring in a different set of people, because these stewards are being entrusted to enforce the rules. They're creating wrong rules and they can't even apply the rules they did put in properly. So, to paraphrase Jose Mourinho, if I speak I'm in big trouble, I'm just going to leave it at that.
I mean, what I like about the rule is that it's clear and obvious. You have track limits. If you violate them, you get a 1 position penalty. It's so clear, it's so obvious, you pretty much can't mess this up. I mean, the stewards kind of messed it up with Jorge Martin, but the rule in itself, I think, is incredibly stupid. And I just looked it up. Brad Binder was 4/10 ahead of Aleix Espargaro at the finish line. So did he gain half a second of an advantage? No. So it's not very justifiable to demote him 1 position. I think it would be fair to give him like a quarter of a second there.
Yeah.
Because the quarter of the second would not destroy the race result like it did now. But also it would give like a message if it was a little bit closer, then you still could lose a position. And you shouldn't take advantage of it in the last lap. Just run wide and gain a little bit of an advantage so nobody can overtake you. And a quarter of a second is like, in my estimation, a fair judgment for not encouraging riders to... The dog is going crazy. Where is she?
Hey, no worries.
I mean, she's not in my office, and my girlfriend just came home. So I don't know if she wants to come in and join us or if she has other problems. So, yeah. Where was I? So I think it's important that you judge it in a way where it's very clear and very obvious. And the benefit of the rule is it is very clear and very obvious at the moment, but it's still stupid. And I think a quarter of a second would be a fair judgment or a fair penalty for a track limits violation. Because, like, for example, if Aleix Espargaro violated track limits and Jorge Martin was like under 10th behind him, he would have lost 3rd or 4th place whatsoever, however you would call it. And therefore, it's like a little bit too hard. The penalty doesn't fit the crime at the moment, but I think it's good that it's clear and obvious and that we have a clear line, because when you want to get into those subjective penalties where you think, okay, this is not, then you get into real trouble, because this is exactly what we get with the irresponsible riding, like drop a position, like Pecco had to do in Jerez, but nobody else ever had to do it, for worse overtakes, or like when do you get a double long lap penalty for taking somebody out, why not, and all of this stuff. We should get clear and obvious rules, and I think this rule is better than some other rules, but I still think the quarter of the second would be better.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think you've made an excellent point as well in terms of the punishment not fitting the crime. I couldn't agree more with you. And I think much more proportionate punishment of, say, a quarter of a second, it makes much more sense for a lot of reasons. The main reason being the margins in MotoGP are tighter than they've ever been. You know, a quarter of a second might separate first from fourth. So that punishment is enough of a deterrent to stop people taking advantage of track limits, that it's actually fair. But it also ensures that if you've built up, say today, a 0.4 of a second gap going towards the finish, you get the fair punishment and you still get the position that you've earned from the rest of the race. So I think a punishment like this that you've suggested makes a lot of sense. Now, of course, the stewards won't put it into action because the stewards don't make any sense. But if you had a punishment such as this, I think it would solve a lot of problems, because like you said, we have a rule that is very clear. This is the green area. You don't touch the green area. You touch the green area 3 times, you get a penalty. But if the penalty is made more sensible, it will solve a lot of the issues on its own. So if something like this is applied, it would help a lot, and I'd love to see that happen.
And I would like to jump to Moto 2 quickly because I think it fits the topic with Pedro Acosta and Fermin Aldeguer. Because I hate this fucking 1 second rule. For everybody who doesn't know, if you cut the chicane like Pedro did today, you have to lose 1 second to your average time in the sector in order to not be penalized. First, how the fuck do you know your average sector time? B, even if you know it, how do you exactly measure to lose 1 second and not 9/10 and 9/100ths of a second and 9/1000ths of a second? So this is incredibly stupid in my opinion. And also, what the fuck did wrong? I mean, did he do wrong? He saved an incredible save. Like Marc Marquez
Oh.
couldn't have done it any better. He was incredible. He saved it and had to use the exit. Left the door open for, I believe, not Abulino. Who was it? Iogura. He left the or Jake Dixon, one of the two. I don't remember. He left the door open and lost a lot of time there. So I think he was already punished enough. And the argument always was, Simon Crafer brought up the argument in conversation with Aki Ayo today, that back in the day there was gravel there. There were no runoff areas. And if there was gravel, he would have lost a lot more time. Yes, this is correct. But in my opinion, this argument is stupid because there is no gravel. So why do we pretend that there is one? But when, for example, in turn one, somebody gets sent wide, and back in the day there was gravel too, but we don't give them a long lap penalty, then the argument falls out of the window because either you go and say every time you lose less than 1 second when you go off track, you get a long lap penalty, which would have been consistent, which is also stupid because what if somebody like Marc Marquez sent Aleix Espargaro in Austria wide 2 times last year? Should Aleix really get a penalty for using the runoff area when somebody else forced him off track? No, we all agree on this. But should Pedro get a penalty, or for the sake of it, Fermin Aldeguer, get a penalty when they use the runoff area and already lose time and let somebody else through because the runoff area is there. And if you have almost a crash like Pedro had, you are entitled to use it. That's why it's there. And we all agree that the runoff areas are good for safety reasons. So why do we pretend on one hand that there should be gravel and if you don't lose enough time, then you get a penalty? But if you get sent wide, why do we pretend that there is no gravel and there's a runoff area and you're able to rejoin? So it doesn't make sense to pick and choose when you bring the gravel argument into it and when not. So, in conclusion, I think the rule is incredibly stupid because if you gain an advantage, you should be penalized. If you don't get an advantage, you shouldn't be penalized. So, my solution for it would be we have the average sector times of the people there. If Pedro has his save, cuts the chicane, rejoins, and his average sector time is faster than his current sector time, then he didn't gain an advantage. It's pretty simple. So he shouldn't be penalized, and Fairman shouldn't be penalized as well today. So, and if it was faster, for example, if he cut the chicane and was half a second faster, yes, then he should be penalized because this would be unfair towards the other riders. And I really believe that they need to figure out a way to fix the track limit rule in the last lap that we discussed and also fix the stupid 1 second rule because A, what the fuck? And B, it doesn't even make sense to bring this gravel argument in it when you use it for shortcuts but not for going wide.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that this argument would have worked itself out by now and that the solutions would have been obvious, but yet again, here we are. You know, we still have to talk about this crap. And I mean, it's just so self-explanatory, you can't believe. You know, if you don't gain an advantage, don't punish somebody for something they haven't gained to start with. If they have gained the advantage, okay, fine, that's a different discussion. But it's like with Pedro Acosta, he made this fucking incredible save. Like you said, a Marc Marquez worthy save. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? What is the point? You've got to use common sense here, otherwise there is no point in doing this. There just isn't. And then, it speaks for itself. It really, really does. And Peanut is here, ladies and gentlemen. Peanut is back
Hello,
on the Bad MotoGP
Peanut,
podcast.
say hi.
Peanut,
Yeah, she
hello.
was so annoying in front of the door that I let her in. I don't know if you heard that, but she was scratching on the door and whining a little bit, so I just let her in. Hello.
The official mascot of the Bad MotoGP podcast, ladies and gentlemen, Peanut is live.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just telling the ladies and gentlemen there about your point you were making about whether you've gained an advantage and sort of, what we do from there. And the point that it comes down to is what you were saying. If you've gained an advantage, fair enough. A punishment, we take a different discussion from there. But it's like Pedro Acosta with this brilliant save earlier. His average sector time wasn't affected. He didn't gain anything from cutting the chicane. So why try and punish him for something he hasn't gained to start with? Why are we overcomplicating this? The solution is right in front of your eyes and it's very, very simple. Just don't try and overdo things. Pedro Acosta did not gain anything from the chicane cutting. Don't punish him.
Yes. And to Pedro and his long lap, he got the long lap penalty, and on the TV it looked like he cut the long lap, and I as well thought he cut the long lap, but the
That meme
CCTV
was fucking brilliant, by the way.
the CCTV coverage showed that he was on the white line the entire time. It was a little bit blurry, and you can find it on the MotoGP side if you're wondering. And it wasn't 100% clear and obvious because the CCTV camera isn't as good as the usual camera. But it showed more or less that Pedro was on the white line the entire time, and this might have been the greatest long lap penalty in the history of long lap penalties. I mean, I don't know what to say. He was on the white line with the tire the entire time. It was as fast as he possibly could do it. And I mean, what else do you want? What can't he do? I mean, he can be penalized better than everybody else, and he still made it onto the podium there. So very, very, very good. And yeah, to his penalty, apparently it was the right decision by the stewards. We should acknowledge this for once. But yeah, greatest long lap penalty in history. And I would like to move back to MotoGP and discuss the things we have to discuss there.
All I'm saying is Jesus walked on water. Pedro Acosta walks in the white line of a long lap penalty.
Yeah,
I'm just saying the signs are there. The signs are
yeah.
there. Quick question before we move back to MotoGP, Leo. Was Pedro's long lap today better than Johan Zarco's in the Czech Republic a few years ago?
I mean, the fact that the Czech Republic long lap back then was just on the outside of the corner, and this long lap was a real long lap, I think Pedro's was better.
Yeah, that's a fair point,
And
actually.
also, everybody thought he cut the chicane, he cut the long lap. So I think, what do you want? Come here.
I wonder what Peanut thinks about this whole long lap situation.
Yeah, Peanut gave her answer. I don't know if you heard her. She, I don't know how to say it. She kind of protested me doing something. I don't know. She's super cuddly the last couple of days, which is a little bit strange because she has a lot of fur. And during the winter time, when it's not particularly warm, she hates cuddling. I don't know why. I always thought it's because it's too warm for her. So the last couple of days we had like 30 degrees. She was super cuddly, and I was lying in bed the other day. In the night, she hops onto my chest and started to sleep on my chest, and she never does this. And oh, it was so incredibly warm for me. So yeah, I accepted it because she never does it, but it was super super cute. And now she lays here on my lap, and I scratch her head, and she enjoys it. So yeah, She's super
Peanut just is
cuddly.
very cuddly.
Yeah,
Let's just be honest here.
yeah, she never is. That's like the problem. But she's so incredibly fluffy, and I would love to cuddle her all year, basically, except summer. And she never lets me do it. And now she allows it. So I will just I will enjoy it as long as it lasts. So
We need
yeah.
to get the clippers for Peanut.
Yeah, apparently there's a problem with the thermoregulation of dogs when you cut their hair, because it could be that when it grows back out that they can't regulate the temperature as good anymore as before. So we already had this thought of cutting her hair because it's super warm for her at the moment, but brushing her is the far better option and get all of this fur out.
Hmm.
So yeah, I will just enjoy her being so cuddly and so friendly for once. And yeah, I don't know where we left off, but I would like to switch back to MotoGP, and especially I would like to talk to you about Aprilia, because Aprilia had a very, very good weekend in a way, but it was also a very bad weekend. So Aleix Espargaro got a podium, which is great, and he got it with the flappy wing. And I wanted to do a meme for the case that Aleix overtook Brad Binder, like the Mike Wisnowski meme, what this green monster who just stares like
Yes.
when you spend millions of euros for aero development and then some dude with some floppy wing overtakes you for the podium. But yeah, sadly he didn't do it. But then we got the Brad Binder memes, so I guess we didn't lose. Memes never lose, and I think that Aleix looked incredible with the damaged bike, and I also thought that Maverick looked very, very competitive until he crashed. He had like 2 or 3 fasted laps of the race, and I thought like the same old Maverick thing. If he can qualify better, if he can get a good start to the race, then he's a real danger for everybody else. But for some reason, all the pieces don't fall into place for him, and I hope that he can fix it for the second half of the season. I hope that Aprilia can fix their issues because they obviously have some.
Hmm.
And man, I hope that they find a way to improve their launch control, because what KTM is doing is absolutely incredible. What Ducati is doing is absolutely incredible. But Aprilia, their launch control is just shit. And if you lose like a couple of positions on the start and can't overtake because of your front tire pressure issues and because of your braking stability issues, then you're in for a long, long day. And I think Aprilia deserves better because their bike is better.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Aprilia actually had a surprisingly good weekend this weekend. Aleix Espargaro looked very solid throughout the weekend. The sprint race, he was there, very solid. Today, he looked really, really good, and even with that broken wing, he he started actually riding very, very well, and he got up to fourth position. But I mean, to be honest, I can't hold it against Aleix because he was never going to be able to overtake Brad's KTM with one busted wing. So I think a P3 actually. I forgot he got that position promoted. To get a podium was unbelievable. I mean, in reality, it was P4, but he got the podium. It is what it is. Yeah, great result for Aleix. To quote a song from the 1980s, he took these broken wings and learned to fly again.
Yeah.
Anybody under the age of 40 is not going to get that reference, but it's okay. Yeah, and Maverick Vinales. Maverick, like you said, and you're absolutely spot on. If Maverick could qualify as well as he used to in the Yamaha, he'd be near unbeatable. Like for all the issues the Yamaha had when Vinales rode it, the launch control was always pretty good. And when he was able to qualify in the front row, we always said we could see him as a favourite winning that race, and he normally would go on to win that race. The problem with the Aprilia, I remember we've discussed this a couple of times, once on the Instagram live and once on an old episode. Um, the problem they have is that their launch control system fucking sucks. and their system is terrible as well. You know, Maverick and Alicia both had issues with the clutch playing up, and the launch control just will not work. I don't know what the problem is, but Massimo Rivola and the engineers at Aprilia need to get that launch control system to work properly, because if they could, they would start better. If they start better, they would have the momentum to move up the positions as the race goes on. And it's not necessarily with Aleix, because Aleix doesn't have to be on the front row really to do well. But if you got Maverick on that front row or at the very front of the second row, he would win races for you. Genuinely, he would. And like you said, you made another very good point. He got up to P6, and I think he'd set his third fastest lap of the race, like you said, and then he crashed out. If not for that crash, he could have gotten a podium today. He was that good. Unfortunately, today is another wasted opportunity for Maverick Vinales, and you have to think at some point it's going to come together. But today, unfortunately, was a missed opportunity for him. But second half of this season, I'd love to start seeing Maverick do something with that Aprilia, because the potential is there.
Speaking about potential, what the fuck is going on with Raul Fernandez? He finished behind Lorenzo Savadori, and Lorenzo Savadori is the test rider who just had a wild card. And I mean, Raul Fernandez has all the potential in the world, and for some reason, it just doesn't work. And I think he is in a very unfortunate situation. I think that KTM absolutely ruined his career by
Yes.
promoting him to MotoGP too early. He should have stayed in Moto2, and then I mean, they didn't want to lose him to Yamaha because this was always the big rumor, and now they lost him to Aprilia. But I think he's in a very unfortunate situation that he has in 4 years, 4 different bikes. But to be so far away from your teammate, from your manufacturer mates, if you want to call it like this, then I mean, something's up. And I really hope he's getting a second year under Aprilia, because to dump him after a season or like half a season then would be unfair. But I mean, Aprilia and RNF, they're in the business of winning, and Raul Fernandez is doing quite the opposite at the moment. I mean, at least Miguel Oliveira showed some promise a couple of races this season, but I don't know what's up with Raul Fernandez. They need to work on whatever's going on with him, because if he gets a second year, which I really hope, and he doesn't improve a lot, then he'll be out of MotoGP, because I don't see him getting a third chance.
Agreed. And just while we've mentioned, because this might be the only time we ever mention this man, that meme about Lorenzo Salvadori, I want Lorenzo v Marquez, we have Lorenzo Marquez at home. That was top tier, by the way. So round of applause to you for that. That was sensational.
Thank you.
But yeah, good question about Raul Fernandez, because it's a really strange situation. And in our season preview, I myself said that Oliveira and Raul Fernandez would be very good on that Aprilia. Now, I think I was right about Oliveira, because he's been unbelievably unfortunate with injury, so it's not fair to judge him in that. But Raul Fernandez, it's a very strange situation, because he just hasn't gotten to grips with the Aprilia the way I thought he would. It's a very weird situation to see right in front of you. To be completely honest, and you are right, like Raul Fernandez and Remy Gardner were both fucked over by KTM. We've discussed that many, many times already. But to go from the KTM, which was a shitbox, to the Aprilia, which he hasn't really done anything with, it's very unfortunate for Raul Fernandez, because like we said in the 2020 season, were it not for Remy Gardner, Raul Fernandez would have been the most dominant Moto2 champion probably ever. But his career's just gone down the wrong path in the last couple of years, what with KTM and then with Aprilia. Hello again, Peanut. Peanut has surfaced once again, ladies and gentlemen. I think with Raul Fernandez, what he should have done from the beginning was maybe just move to Yamaha and try and make that work, because Raul Fernandez's riding style has always been quite smooth, and I think it would suit the inline better than the V4. He just looks awkward on it. He looks like he can't quite get to grips with it. Now, like you said, a lot of this is dependent on whether he even gets a second year in the class full time. I think he probably should, because I still think the race winning potential is there. But is it with is it with Aprilia? I don't know if I see it.
I mean, we could be looking at the situation where Frankie moves away from Yamaha, and nobody wants to go to Yamaha, so Raul Fernandez
Yeah,
gets the
we
seat,
could be.
which would be unfortunate for Yamaha because I think that Raul Fernandez is not the rider they are looking for. Goodbye. Yeah, she wants to go out. I'll be back in a second. Okay, I'm back. And I think we could be very well looking at a situation where Raul Fernandez goes to Yamaha if Frankie indeed moves. And he could fill in because they want a veteran. They want somebody who has some MotoGP experience. I don't think that Raul Fernandez is their preferred option. I heard a rumor about Augusto Fernandez going to Yamaha. And this is also, I think, more of a plan C, plan D, whatsoever, because if I'm looking at Augusto and I'm looking at Raul Fernandez, then I rather keep Frankie. But if Frankie wants to go away and they have to fill in, and Jorge Martin doesn't want to come, and Marc Marquez doesn't want to come, and somebody else who might be available, they all don't want to come, then I think it could be an option, but I think it's not the preferred way for Yamaha to do business because they don't have the experience to really develop the bike in a way that Yamaha needs at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But Raul Fernandez certainly has all the potential in the world, and I think Aprilia could also be a very interesting topic for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as it pertains to Yamaha, I think the way Yamaha's probably thinking goes a little something like this. I think plan A is keep Frankie and pray he gets some wins back and he looks like 2020 Frankie, which is, of course, what we all want. I think plan B is praying that Jorge Martin has gone mental and he wants to go to Yamaha. Um, I think plan C is probably Raul Fernandez leaving Aprilia, and then plan D is probably Augusto Fernandez leaving KTM, which, if Pedro Acosta gets promoted with KTM, might happen. But the problem as well with Yamaha, it's something else you mentioned. It's not just a matter of keeping Franco and praying that he gets better. It's, does Franco want to even stay there anymore? And I'm not even just talking about the Ducati rumors. What you have to remember as well is whenever Frankie was extended, he was treated so badly by Yamaha when the rumors of Toprak Razgatlioglu were at their strongest. I mean, they treated him like shit in extending him. You know, they, instead of killing the rumors and signing Frankie, they let those rumors go on and on and on for months until they finally extended him. And I don't think Frankie's forgotten that. Like, even, I think we said this last episode or the episode before, when Frankie was asked about extending beyond, I think, 2024, he said, you have to ask Lynn. I don't even know if I want to be here after 2024. So what we might be looking at is, if Yamaha don't start getting results in soon, you might look at a situation where Frankie doesn't even want to stay with you. And if one of the Ducati seats opens up, being a talented Italian rider, he's probably heading across the aisle. And I think his head's probably been turned already.
Yeah, if I'm Ducati, I would be starting to try to fill all of my seats with Italian riders. I think it would be funny.
It would be funny.
But yeah, I really want to talk to you about Marc Marquez and the whole Honda
Ooh.
situation because it's like an ever occurring thing that Marc Marquez races the sprint race and doesn't even try to race the main races or doesn't finish the main races. He hasn't finished a race in 250 days. The last time
Jesus.
was in Sepang 2022.
Wow.
And I don't know what the fuck is going on at Honda because Mark has a broken rib, and Remy proved in 2021 that you can win a championship with a broken rib. I mean, he won in Portimao and finished P8 in Valencia. But there was a championship on the line, and everybody knows that at Honda at the moment there is nothing on the line. And I think that Marcus did the right decision, considering that the Honda is trying to injure you every time. And I think this 5 week summer break really is good for Marc Marquez. I don't particularly know if it's so good for Honda and the whole Honda future, but yeah, I mean, it would be a win for Honda if after the summer break they could return with 4 riders and not having to race Stefan Bradl or Ika Lecuona or I don't know, do they have a third replacement
I
rider?
don't think they do have a third.
Yeah, they should hire a third. But yeah, I think Honda needs to do some work, but like cancel the 23 season. It's over. Get your hands on the 24 bike. There's no real reason to improve the 23 bike except you try something for the 24 bike. But like you can't change the engine. You have only one error update, which you should use in order to get some data for the next season. Um, you can't, as far as I'm concerned, you can't really change the chassis too much. You can experiment like with swing arms or with different settings, which should be important that everybody has like a testing role for next season. But they need to get a direction where to develop with Honda because it feels like they have no direction. They changed something with the engine position in the bike to balance the bike more towards the front. Because remember when Marc Marquez was so dominant, the balance of the Honda was shifted to the front very, very extremely in a way where Honda had all the grip in the world on the front tire and had no grip at all on the rear tire,
Mm-hmm.
which led to Marc Marquez only being able to ride this bike.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went the other way, and Paul had a good race in Qatar, but then it fell apart. And there was this approach to make the bike more balanced. This didn't work out. Now they changed it a little bit more towards the front. This didn't work out. And I think Honda really needs to get all the riders involved and make a plan where this bike is rideable for everybody. And I don't really know why Honda isn't good in the aero development department because yes, they have the Stegosaurus, yes, they have the wings at the side, and they have these kind of F ducts, but they don't experiment with ground effect. They don't experiment with different wings too much, and I would really like to see them doing this at the test and getting a direction where you have a good bike which is developed with the aero. Not develop a bike and then put the aero on. It should be that the aero is a crucial part of the bike because that's more or less win it or lose it at the moment in MotoGP. And unless Honda wants to sit out until 2027 and don't race in MotoGP at all or be at the back for the next couple of years, then they need to get their hand on aerodynamics because it's not happening without it at the moment. And they really, really need to make this bike rideable, and they need to make it faster because it's impossible to ride it at the moment. And they need to figure out a way to at least get a direction and develop there. Because when you're Marc Marquez and you're on the Misano, and at the Misano test on the Honda, and you see no progress at all for the 2024 season, it's a bad sign. And Mark is still the top rider, and they also need to get Alex Rins on board. They need to get Joan Mir on board. And at the moment, I'm not convinced that signing Ai Ogura would be a good idea because you need an experienced rider in order to develop the bike. It wouldn't make sense to waste Ai Ogura's career by injuring him.
Yeah. I mean, like, this is a very, very large topic to try and break down. So I'll try and move through it as quickly as I can, piece by piece. I mean, the philosophy around incorporating aero onto the bike, you only have to look at what's on the grid to see why. Excuse me. Look at Gigi Dall'Igna and the team at Ducati. That bike, the aero is a fundamental part of the bike. It is literally built into the bike. Look at KTM, the only manufacturer challenging Ducati. Pit Buyer and the team at KTM have started directly incorporating aero updates into the frame and the chassis of the bike itself. They're not just sticking bits of aero on here and there to try and make it work. Now that's a different conversation. I want to focus on Marc Marquez because I think this is the crux of what we're talking about. Have you seen Alberto Puig's comments from earlier today? I mean, this is a real mess of a situation. For those of you who somehow haven't seen these comments, Alberto Puig basically said when he was asked about Marc Marquez, he has a contract with Honda, but we don't want to keep people who don't want to be here. Now, that tells me that the relationship between Marquez and Honda is at breaking point, and it's only gonna take one more bad weekend to sever this completely. And I think we're at that point, if I'm honest with you. With Marc Marquez, he's so badly beaten up now with this bike. I've said this really since he first injured himself in Jerez. You can only take so much punishment before your body will shut down on you. And the fact that we're at a point now where if we did not have sprint races, Marc Marquez wouldn't be on the track at all, probably. That is a very concerning sign if you're Honda. And I think with Marc Marquez, I have no idea where he even fits in the rest of the grid. Do Ducati make an exception to fit him in? Do KTM try and get him in? I don't know. But unless this Honda performs the miracle of all miracles, I think Marc Marquez is gone. I think he'll retire for a season, see out the rest of his contract, and then I think he'll move to another manufacturer. And that brings me on to the bike because a lot of our podcast episodes this season have been dominated by how bad the bike is. And where you covered the development of it excellently, the development of the bike itself for the past few years. And the problem with Honda now is that there's no cohesion, there's no clear vision for where this bike goes. Because up until 2020, like you said, it was all front end, no rear end. Didn't have to worry about the other riders because Marc Marquez could ride it and he could win championships and he could win races. Then Marc Marquez gets injured. You have to get other riders who can ride this bike. The other riders couldn't ride that bike, so you try and make it more balanced. That didn't work. Pol Espargaro tried, Pol Espargaro failed. Now you're at a situation where you're trying to build the bike a little more towards Marc with a little more front end emphasis. But now Joan Mir can't ride it. He's out injured because it tried to kill him. Alex Rins has a severely broken leg. It tried to kill him too. How Taka Nakagami's still alive through all of this, I'm actually quite amazed. He's one tough son. He's one tough mother, I'll give him that much. But yeah, with Honda, there is no clear philosophy for how this bike develops. Honda have designed this bike. They can't do anything. They've got a Kalex chassis. That's failed too. So, I mean, I'm at a point where I don't really know what more I can say, to be honest with you, because Honda are just in such a hole right now that I don't know how they get out of it.
I think that the whole Marc Marquez situation is a little bit blown out of proportion by the media because we love to talk about Marc Marquez. It's amazing to talk about him. It's always headlines when you say something about it. But as long as we don't have official confirmation by Honda that they're letting him out of the contract, because that's like the breaking point of it. Marc Marquez wants out. Yes, he can want out as much as he wants. As long as he has a contract, he's not going anywhere. And if Honda isn't willing to let him out of this contract, then we're stuck with Marc Marquez at Honda in 2024. And from my perspective, there is no reason why Honda would let him go because he is box office. He brings all the sponsors, he brings all the money. And even if headlines are bad, there are worse without him because Marc is the only one who can ride this thing more or less at the moment. Alex Rins won, which is incredible when you, the further you move away from this victory, the more incredible it looks. Because he shouldn't win on this thing. And the funniest thing is that he ruined Honda's concession points with it for next year. So Yamaha might get some. But yeah, Marc Marquez has a contract. And as long as he is not out of this contract, we can speculate all we want, but he is not moving. So with Honda, I mean, first of all, you mentioned Taka Nakagami. He did incredible the last couple of races. He, considering the place of the bike, he did a very, very good job. And also, I just looked it up. The next test is in Misano, as we mentioned, and it's on 9/11. And I really think Honda needs to attack this test.
Jesus Christ.
And they need to hit the target there.
Oh, fucking hell, Leo. Guys, I'm not involved.
Because if not, then I could really see Marcus, even if he doesn't get out of this contract, just retiring for the 24 season, because there's no point. I mean, he's doing the right thing at the moment. There is no point in racing this thing and risking his health. I mean, where do you want to go with this thing? Either you risk it and you end up at the gravel trap and risk being permanently damaged, or you ride around in P17 and play it safe. And there's no point in doing both. So I think what Marcus is doing at the moment is, for his own sake, very, very smart. I don't necessarily know if it's good for Honda and the development of the bike, but I really think that he's smart about it at the moment. And also his sprint performance in Germany and his sprint performance in Assen showed that he is a little bit over it. We discussed it in the previous episode. He's just over Honda. But like Alex Rins, he's extremely injured, and Joan Mir is missing how many GPs this season? I mean, they need to get together and find a solution, not this year, but next year. But they need to get the direction of the solution this year, because if they don't have a direction for 9/11, then I mean, who knows what will happen in 24? Then yeah, they need to figure something out rather quickly and bring something to the test, like do some ground effect things. Experiment with wings, experiment with engine position, experiment with different electronic settings, experiment with rider position. There are so many things you could do to get a direction. You don't have to find a solution in one test, but get a direction. Like, this could work, this is good, this is bad, and make that everybody is working in the same direction. Because when you just have one rider who can ride your bike, you're dependent on one rider. And with Honda, not even Marc Marquez can ride the bike anymore. And with Yamaha, not even Fabio Quartararo can ride this bike anymore. And if you lose both of them, you're more fucked than you are right now. And this is why I don't see that Marc is getting out of Honda pretty soon, even if he wants to. So, yeah, I'm actually very surprised that Taka did so good. But regarding Marc and his unwillingness to race, I completely understand it. I think he's doing the right thing at the moment to rest up and to make to make his future not harder than it is at the moment. And yeah, I don't know what else there is to say, because it's not a Marc Marquez issue. It's a Honda issue. But what I want to say about Marc Marquez is his antics about the on the race weekend have been rather questionable again with Enea Bastianini. And I think, like, shit happens with everybody. Like, Fabio took out Joan Zarco today. It was like a normal racing incident. But why is it always Marc Marquez? Like, you have a rider like Luca Marini taking out Enea Bastianini. Since then, Luca Marini hasn't done shit anymore. And you have these situations that happen in motorcycle racing. But why is it always Marc Marquez in the stupidest way possible?
Well, this is the thing with Marc Marquez, and people have said this for a very, very long time. Riders get into scraps, okay? Like you said, you have racing incidents, shit happens. That's the best way to put it. But trouble always seems to find Marc Marquez for some reason, or maybe he finds it. Either way, one of them finds the other. And like with Enea Bastianini, I mean, that was just ridiculous, is what that was. It was so unnecessary. But I mean, with Marc Marquez, he is at a point now where in previous years he was always willing to crash because there was always a greater goal in mind. He was always willing to crash because he was winning and because he could still win world titles. He had no problem crashing and suffering injuries and high sides because there was still something at the end of the line. The problem with Marc Marquez is that for the first time in his MotoGP career, he is the nail and not the hammer. And when you spend all your career as the hammer, it's very easy to keep going as long as you're still winning. But when you become the nail and you start getting hammered instead of doing the hammering, it's very hard to come back from that. And he's been the nail in the worst possible way because he's been let down by the equipment he's been riding and the team that he's with. To be completely honest, Honda have been sending him out on not only substandard but dangerous machinery. And his body is at a point now where he can't take much more damage from it, or he will be permanently and very severely injured. And like you said, with the contract situation, we can speculate. I mean, we could do a 3-hour podcast just on Mark's situation and speculate where he might go and what he might do. But Honda holding Mark hostage will be a terrible look if that is what it is, because there would be no point in that. There's no point in keeping an unhappy superstar locked in a golden cage. There is no point in that. But the problem with the Honda project is that they have four very different riders who want the bike in very different directions. Like you said, and like I've said, there's no cohesion, there's no togetherness. Joan Mir and Alex Rins are very smooth riders from a very smooth bike, the Suzuki bike. You have Marc Marquez, who was able to ride that dog shit Honda because there was no front end on it. He could make the difference. Nakagami's kind of been stuck in the middle for years, trying to ride based on what everybody else has wanted. And come this Misano test on that very unfortunate date, if they don't get their act together quickly, this project is going to crumble to the ground very, very, very quickly, and not in a good way. They have to start getting it together, or this whole thing falls apart. And without
Yeah,
Marc Marquez, it would have fallen apart 2 years ago.
without Marc Marquez, it would have fallen apart in 2015. I mean, I will say one last thing regarding Mark. I've heard a rumor, actually two rumors, which are kind of contradicting each other. Which the first one is that Mark Marquez offered himself to KTM and KTM rejected him. And I understand because KTM is in a problematic space without Mark Marquez. I mean, Brad Binder's under contract. Paul Espargaro's under contract, Jack Miller's under contract, and Pedro Acosta is kind of under contract, and Augusto Fernandez is doing pretty well. So it would look pretty bad. So you have potentially 5 riders for 4 places. So what they wanted to do was to get Husqvarna on the grid with 6 bikes. But the problem is that Dorna wants to keep this spot for a manufacturer who's joining in.
Yeah.
Could be somebody like BMW or MV Agusta. I'm just throwing names out here. I don't know. And if they want to bring Husqvarna to the MotoGP grid, they need to arrange something with another team. And the most logical thing would be Gresini, because Gresini is the only one who don't have a contract, or maybe they just signed a contract. I don't know, but Gresini would be like the only option.
Mm-hmm.
And Grisini, would you rather lose your thing you have with Ducati, your own brand, and go to this state where you're the team for another factory again, like they did with Aprilia? Remember, Grisini Racing for a long time was Aprilia. Then Aprilia kind of went to get their own team recently, a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm. I
And
actually think it was
Grisini,
2 years ago. I think you're right.
I think it was in 2022, actually. I think in
Could have been.
2021, Grisini was still part of the Aprilia, and then in 2022, they got the seat where Enea Bastianini and Fabio Di Giannantonio joined the team.
You're right. You're right, Jess.
So I don't know if Grisini really wants to do that, and it doesn't make any sense to go to KTM when you have a Ducati. So this thing is more or less out of the window, which would bring two additional slots to KTM's big problem, would be would make them able, which would enable them. This was the word, which
Mm-hmm.
would enable them to sign both Pedro and Mark and keep Augusto and the whole other people there.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently, this is not something Dorna wants. So yeah, it's in a very, very difficult spot. And again, Ducati, I don't see Ducati signing Marcus, even though it would make the most sense, like get him to Grisini. But then again, would you rather have somebody like Pedro or Tony Abolino or somebody like Marc Marquez? Considering in the next 10 years, I would rather go after somebody like Pedro or after somebody like Tony Abolino, because with Marc, you have the upside that you could win, but you're already winning. So why would you do this?
Mm-hmm.
But the downside is you get a cripple and pay somebody a salary which shouldn't be too low for being injured, like Honda's doing at the moment. So it's a difficult situation for Marc Marquez and a difficult situation for Honda, a difficult situation for KTM, and a difficult situation for Ducati. They all have their own problems. And I heard a couple of years ago, I think it was in it should have been in the summer of 2022. I heard a rumor from somebody inside of the paddock that they are trying to move Jake Dixon into MotoGP
I heard that as well.
because Jake Dixon is British and Dorna wants a British rider on the grid.
Mm-hmm.
And with him winning right now, it makes a lot of sense for PR purposes. But then again, I don't really see where you would fit him, because then you would have to move people out, because if you're a team, you have to choose between Tony Abolino and Jake Dixon, you're taking Tony Abolino. If you have to choose between Pedro and Dixon, you take Pedro. If you have to choose between Alonso Lopez and Pedro, you take Alonso Lopez. So you have to make Iogura, same thing. You have to make a lot of free places there in order to get him there. And also Dorna would need to get involved there to sign Jake Dixon. But with performances like this, he's making it easier for them to justify him moving to MotoGP. And I think that it would be a good thing for the sport. And I think that Jake is developing in a way with his win now in Assen where you could really justify it and where he could also succeed. I don't think succeed in a way like Pedro Acosta could succeed or like Pecco Bagnaia is succeeding, but I could see him succeeding in a way like Paul Espargaro succeeded in his MotoGP career. He was always good, never special, but always good. He was there, and yeah, then we could see a British rider on the grid again.
Yeah, it's a really really interesting situation because there's a lot of moving parts, no pun intended, in the paddock at the moment. Because we, like you said, we have this situation with grid spaces. You know, KTM maybe want to put two more bikes on the grid, but Dorna want another manufacturer to come in. You know, this all comes back to Suzuki leaving. You know, I don't believe in intervention from Dorna. I do believe you should let things play out as they are, but it would have been so much better for the sport if Dorna had incentivized Suzuki to stay in the paddock. You know, you don't let a manufacturer like that walk away, and they've left MotoGP to try and build fucking space cars or some shit. You know, I saw a news article. They're trying to make cars that'll go to space when they could have had MotoGP bikes on the MotoGP grid. That's a rant for another day. But we are in a very difficult spot now because I don't see what other manufacturer has the capacity or the resources to enter MotoGP on a brand new project. You know, for years we've wanted Kawasaki to return. They're already preoccupied with World Superbike and they're struggling enough at the moment as it is. We've talked about BMW, but they have no interest in coming into the paddock. You know, personally, I think we discussed this a few weeks ago. You know, if BMW took the Suzuki platform, rebranded it, and put a BMW bike in, that would be really cool. But the money and the resources it would take from Munich would be unbelievable. As much as I would love it, I really, really would love it, and I think it would help their already brilliant bike sales. But we're in this situation and we have to deal with it. So that's one part of the issue. The other part of the issue is that we have so many good riders now competing for such few spots that it's hard to work out what to prioritize. Now, Jake Dixon is a very, very intriguing discussion because he is hitting hot at the absolute right time coming into the summer break. He has now left people with something to think about because he's won. And again, obviously, as you know, I watch the BT broadcast because I'm in the north of Ireland. That's our broadcast. And they were saying if Jake Dixon can beat Pedro Acosta to win today, that really gives you something to think about. And we've talked about passport politics in the paddock before. And obviously, you know, the UK and Ireland is a very large bike market. You have to keep this part of the world interested because if it just becomes the Italian and the Spanish championship, nobody wants to watch it anymore. And to be honest, you know, the English speaking world, you know, England, the United States, Australia, they have such a rich history of being in the paddock that you have to keep somebody in there. You know, Barry Sheen, one of my favorite riders of all time, Kenny Roberts, Casey Stoner, Wayne Gardner, the list goes on and on and on. And I think Jake Dixon would be a great representative of that, to have him in the grid. The question again, though, it all comes back to where do you put him? Do you throw him on a Yamaha, maybe? I don't know. You know, it's a mess because there's so few bikes and so many good people you could justify putting onto a bike. I mean, Pedro Acosta, we know he's going up, okay? Be it with KTM or with somebody else, he's going up. Tony Arbolino has had such a good season that he kind of has to move up because he has nothing more he can achieve in Moto 2, except for winning the title, but he's basically good enough already. And that then leaves Jake Dixon. And like you said, Dorna know they need a British or an Irish rider. I'd actually, personally, obviously being Irish, I'd love to see an Irish rider, but that'll never happen. But they do need a British rider in
Casey
the paddock.
O'Gorman.
I'd love to see Casey O'Gorman in the Premier Class one day. It would be amazing to hear the Irish national anthem on top of the podium, but that's for the future, and we have to talk about today. I think Jake Dixon makes a lot of sense. Like you said, he's with a great team, the Aspar team. He's won today in a very good performance, had a great weekend, actually. So the question really becomes, where do you fit him in? Because there's no spots for him to go in. And you can't have a Honda situation from years ago where you have three riders to a team because you can't do that. So, I mean, I don't know. I'd love to hear people's thoughts about this, actually. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Where do you think Jake Dixon should go in the grid? Because I'm befuddled. I have no idea.
I know from a source that I trust very much that Jake Dixon got the seat at Aspa because he went to Dorna and said, I'm out of a seat after Petronas pulled out. And Alonso Lopez was supposed to get this seat at Aspa and didn't get it because of Jake Dixon.
Okay.
And looking back at it, it's like splitting hairs when you consider the results this season, even though I think Alonso Lopez is a lot better than Jake Dixon. But I mean, at the end of the day, this is all silly season talk, and we should discuss this again in the summer break.
Yeah.
But I would like to discuss Jake Dixon's race because he did a very, very good job. He had a very mature race. I'm a little bit angry that he didn't crash in turn 5 when he went wide because the memes would have been insane. But yeah, he did it. I mean, apart from this one mistake, he was perfect. Ayogura is a very capable rider, and he basically put him in a position into turn 1 where he was out of it because of this very hard but very fair braking maneuver.
Mm-hmm.
Pietro was on the limit and over it, so the pace Jake Dixon was setting was incredible. We are losing a lot of meme classics like Dennis Önschu not winning and Jake Dixon crashing in the lead. RIP to this. But his performance was incredible and he absolutely deserved it. I mean, there was this graphic at the broadcast where they showed his best results and it's like all third
Yeah.
places, like
It's like
4 or 5
nine
or
third place
whatsoever.
finishes.
Yeah, too many, and he really deserved better. And I was feeling a little bit bad for Ayogura because I think after this injury it would look great. But I mean, the pace Jake Dixon was setting was incredible. And when you judge by this, he really deserved it. And I'm happy for him. I mean, he looked over the moon, and after the interview, he was crying like a little kid who went to Disneyland. And yeah, I'm happy for him. It's a little bit sad that we lost the memes, but I guess there will be new ones, and we still have Aaron Canet not winning, so it's not completely over.
We can always laugh at Aaron Cannon at the end of the day, you know. No, look, with Jake Dixon, I'm really, really delighted for him because he was so on it this weekend. And I was obviously like you, I was watching from Friday all the way through to today. And I did say to myself, this is either the weekend he finally wins it or he's never going to win. You know, it's very rare you get dominant weekends in any class where you're far and away the best rider in that class. And today he was just on it. It all came together perfectly. All the conditions, all the factors, they all came together very, very well for him. And I thought he just had a brilliant race. And one thing I'd actually really like to point out, and this will tell you how good of a rider Jake Dixon is, on that last lap when he was being chased by Iogura after turn 1, usually on the last lap, the rider following you, chasing you for the win, closes the gap between you. And in every single sector, the gap just got bigger and it got bigger and it got bigger. All right, Jake threw away some time doing a wheelie at the finish line, but in every sector, the gap was growing in the lead between Jake and Iogura. And I think with Jake Dixon, a bit like Pecco in the Premier class in 2021, this first taste of blood could actually be a massive start of something for Jake Dixon. Now, is he going to win loads of races this season? I don't know. Probably not. But the confidence this will give him can't be underestimated. This could really kickstart Jake Dixon on at least podiums, third places, second places, the occasional win as well now and again. But I have to say, I'm delighted for Jake. You know, he's such a great character. And if you're watching the MotoGP World feed, you probably don't see this. But with the BT Sport feed of MotoGP that we get, he interacts so brilliantly with Susie Perry and Neil Hodgson and everybody who's presenting. You know, they're all so supportive of him. And it was so great to see how proud everybody was of him because they've watched him and covered him and interviewed him for years. And to see him finally climb the mountain and get the win, you know, with his team there. And there was a beautiful photo as well of him with his wife Sarah hugging him after the race. You might have seen that. You know, Jake is such a good guy, you know, and I think if you put him in the Premier class, his personality shines through as well. And I think in MotoGP, we need personality now more than ever, you know, because I compare Jake Dixon to somebody like Pecco Bagnaia, who is the best rider in the world, don't get me wrong. But it's hard to feel strongly about Pecco. You know, he's kind of just a quiet person who does his own thing. I don't feel about Pecco the why I felt about Valentino. You know, funny, always doing funny celebrations, always doing these wacky things around the paddock. Jake Dixon has personality, and Jake Dixon will bring personality. And I think if you promote him, not just for the win, there's a big package you're getting with Jake Dixon as well. You're getting the humor, you're getting the personality. He's really good friends with Fabio Quartararo. You'll see that relationship blossom as well. So overall, brilliant weekend. I'm so delighted for Jake Dixon, and he may have secured himself a seat at the big table with that win.
Yeah, this would be great for British motorcycle racing. And what would be good for Japanese motorcycle racing is A, if Yamaha and Honda get their act together, but B, I Ogura, when he is healthy, he's a motherfucker. I
Oh,
mean,
he's a
he is
motherfucker when he's on it.
still he is still hindered by his injury. I mean, he has a left hand injury, which was pretty nasty. But when he is on his A game, that everybody else is in danger. When he has weekends like he had last year in Jerez or last year in Motegi, he is and until it went wrong in Sepang. I mean, he was incredible in those races, and I really believe that Ayogura can really do something in his future. And I really hope that he takes this 5 week summer break to rest up and come back at 100% and remind everybody how incredibly good he is. And same with Alonso Lopez. I mean, he wasn't injured, but the first half of the season didn't went to plan. But when you consider last year in Silverstone, he had this amazing battle with Augusto Fernandez last year in Silverstone. And I really think that those races where Pedro was injured last year, let's not forget this, that other riders can really shine, because I think we saw a difference between Pedro's performance in Mugello or in Le Mans until it lasted, in Jerez, those races where he has experience, and in Assen today, because he wasn't as dominant as he usually is. And I think that when you go to Silverstone, or let's put even the Red Bull Ring in there, then that you have a real possibility of other people shining a little bit more, including Tony Arbolino. I think Tony Arbolino missed a golden opportunity today to further enhance his championship charge, because going into the summer break, if he would have beaten Pedro, this would have been incredible for him and his confidence. But it went a little bit downhill for him. But I think we have a very interesting race at Silverstone at hand.
Yeah, for sure. I think with Silverstone, the implications of that race are going to be huge for this championship. First of all, Iagora is a monster. You know, if you forgot about how good Iagora is, you know, to quote the Rolling Stones, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Iagora, and that is how good he is. You know, he was so good today, and like you said, he has an injured left hand as well, which people forget about. But a fully fit and healthy Iagora is a very, very tough competitor. He's so good on that bike. And I think he is a real asset to that class. And I do think eventually you will see Iagora replace Nakagami at LCR. That's where I see him landing. But yeah, Iagora is brilliant. Great to see him back today and battling where he deserves to be. And as for the wider class, you know, like you said, Alonso Lopez, the start to the season probably hasn't been the one he would have wanted, admittedly, but he's still been there. He's still been there, and that's all you can really ask of him. You know, he's done a very good job. He's been solid, and he's going to build on that. He really, really is. I did think today was very pivotal for Pedro Acosta because he obviously struggled a bit today. And I think if Tony Arbolino had finished very far ahead of him, I think that would have been a difficult situation. But the fact that he managed to finish ahead of Arbolino and keep that gap down, I think that was very, very big for Pedro today to get that sixth position and take that to Silverstone, where he'll probably do very, very well. So yeah, I gotta say, I'm really excited for when we come back after the summer break, because it is going to kick off with a bang.
Yeah. Also, Moto 3 got a lot more interesting in the championship, because Danny Olgado showed how incapable the RC 250 GP is in off-road, where KTM usually accelerates, but he just dug a hole and couldn't get out of it without help. But no, in all seriousness, Daniel Gardo took a dump today at Assen, and Jaume Masia took full advantage of it, and he's just 16 points behind it. So I know it's Jaume Masia, and I know he's Mr. Inconsistent, but we could look at a real championship battle there. And if I mean, Moto 3 is such a chaotic place, anything can happen. But if we had a close championship battle, I think that we could really have a lot more tension in Moto 3 than it was maybe last year, where Isan was just super dominant. But yeah, I really believe that that Olgado needs to tidy up a little bit more. Those weekends can't happen because you always have bad weekends. That's normal. I mean, especially in Moto 3. But you have to extract the most out of it, even if it's just 5 points. But to crash out so early in the race, it looked like the whole pressure of the race got a little bit to him. And I would say that Daniel Olgado was capable of going into the points today. But yeah, he needs to clean this up. And apart from that, he's a brilliant rider. And I hope for a little bit more spice in the championship. Let's put it this way.
Yeah, I agree. And when it comes to Danny Holgado, I have to admit I share the same thoughts as you and the same sentiment. I felt that today I think it could have been his for the taking in terms of getting some high points. You know, he's just got to tighten it up a bit, because when you crash out so early, you're inviting guys like Jaume Masia to just eat up the advantage on you. And especially in a classic Moto 3, you have got to take advantage of every point you can get. I mean, even today, like you said, even if it's just 5, 6 points, whatever it is, every point you can pick up is essential in Moto 3 because it's so unpredictable. One weekend you could win the race and the next you could be in 15th. You have to try and take advantage of every situation that you can. And that's what Jaume Masia did very well today. Came through the field, won very, very well, and he picks up some vital points to cut this championship lead down. Now, like you said, will he stay at that level? Knowing Jaume Masia, probably not. But he also has the quality that he can take advantage of the situation and he can work his way up the field and he can work his way into the higher echelon of points where Danny Holgado should be. If he can work his way into that situation, Jaume Masia, and if he can keep himself there, he could really make this a tight battle for the championship, which we both want to see. Otherwise, you just have to hope that somebody else messes up. But for Danny Holgado, he's gotta realize that finishing is important in this class. And if he can start to finish consistently and get to that, then the title becomes his to lose. But if he keeps doing what he did today at Assen, Jaume Masia will start gaining on him.
Yeah, and the key is to not qualify behind Ana Carrasco because this ruins all of your confidence. I mean, he probably thought to himself, I can't finish behind her in the race. This would be too embarrassing, and just crashed instead. It was like the better option for him. And I really hope that he can qualify a little bit better, even if it's one place in front of Ana Carrasco. That's the confidence boost he will need for Silverstone. And also, I would like to give a quick shout out to Colin Vaya and Joel Kelso because they had a very good race. I mean, Joel Kelso led the race at the beginning, and it looked like at the end of the race, the pace was a little bit too strong for him, but he kept at it, but he wasn't too aggressive towards the end. Quite the opposite of David Munoz, who was like over aggressive once again. And I really hope that those two can build off it. I mean, Colin is still a rookie. He's a tall rider for the class, but he did an incredible job at his home GP. And Joel Kelso, I mean, he's showing flashes of his speed. And I think if he can again tidy it up a little bit, then we can see race wins from him. I mean, he beat Danny Olgado in the Junior GP championship a couple of times, and he had very, very dominant races there. And I really think that Kelso, he's built for the class, he's a midget, but that's what you need to be. And if he can build on those positive experience, leave the bad luck aside, which he usually carries around like a backpack, then he has a very, very good chance of collecting some good results, because sometimes it works out your way, sometimes it doesn't. But today he had a very mature performance, and he took what was there and didn't crash out. He didn't do anything stupid. And it was a very good performance by both of these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the shout out for Colin Vire. Thought he had a very good race today. He's starting to build some momentum as well, which is good to see. Good to see him progressing up the rankings, which yeah, I'm very happy for him. He's the next in line of some very talented European kids coming through Moto 3. Joel Kelso, delighted to see him doing well as well. He's been another rider that's been so unfortunate with injury over the last year or two. He's been a very unfortunate recipient of some undeserved bad luck. But like you said, he was he was leading the race at the beginning, which will have done his confidence the world of good. Finished pretty well today as well. And yeah, it's all confidence, it's all momentum for Joel Kelso, and it's important for him to carry into Silverstone and beyond into the second half of the season. If Joel Kelso can finish this Moto 3 season not necessarily within the top 10, but within striking distance of the top 10, that will give him an excellent platform for Moto 3 next year. And I would love to see Joel do well, because I think he's super, super talented, and I think he can do some magic in this class.
Yeah. And I want to point out how fucking awesome is Dennis Önci. I mean, this clip of him, Jaume Masia, and Ayumu Sasaki before the podium celebration is absolute gold. Like, he was this this ADHD kid who just can't sit still, and was like, and he's like this after the race. All of his adrenaline is still away. He was shouting, "Let's vote! Who was the craziest rider?" And everybody agreed, obviously David Munoz. And I felt like Jaume Masia was giving like a more calculated analysis of what Jaume Masia is doing, and Dennis Önci was all crazy. It was super, super fun, and I really hope he finishes on all podiums this season, because I would like to see this every race. He is absolutely amazing. And his crazy laugh there after he said he enjoyed David Munoz's craziness, I think it will get memed at some point this season. So yeah, just wanted to give a quick shout out to David Munoz and Dennis Önschel for being also great meme material. David Munoz more in a negative way, but also I'm very happy that Dennis Önschel evolved from this very aggressive rider who got banned for weaving on the straight for a couple of races and injuring half the grid, and developing more into a mature rider who is still very aggressive, but is not putting other riders at danger. So I hope that David Munoz can make the same development there. And yeah, apart from that, how good are these two?
Oh, they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. You know, it's so weird to see Dennis Onchu actually growing up and not trying to kill half of the Moto 3 grid. It's a very strange feeling, and maybe one that I'll never get used to. But I have to say, aside from being a complete psychopath, I'm very happy for him. You know, I mean, like I said, for some weird reason, I picked him to win the whole bloody thing. So I'm kind
Could
of
still happen.
I'm
Could
kind of
still happen.
I'm kind of emotionally invested in Dennis Onchi doing well, and seeing him tweaking out backstage talking about the race is one of the funniest things I've seen in a long time. So yeah, I have to say, I mean, look, the talent is there. We've talked about this with Dennis Onchu. The talent and the abilities there. It's just whether he can get it going and keep it going. As for David Munoz, I mean, David Munoz does David Munoz things, really. There's not a whole lot more I can say about him, but look, both guys are great meme material. I love them both, and they're never boring, you know. And
Yeah.
that at the end of the day, what more can you ask for?
Yeah. It's nice to see Dennis Andrew grow up. I remember when he was in my comments insulting me after Jerez
I
in
remember that.
2021, and now commenting positive things after the Sachsenring GP memes, where he said like, "Yeah, Aaron Canet and Joan Zarco, it was a great time," and something like this along the line. But yeah, very, very, very nice, and I hope we will see great things from him. And I think Moto 2 will be more of his class because he's super aggressive, and I think it suits the Moto 2 bike more, and his height hinders him a little bit in Moto 3. So I really believe that Moto 2 is the next logical step for him, and I think that it will be fun to see him in Moto 2.
We have to try and get Dennis Ontra on the podcast sometime in the future because the evolution of this relationship is just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, he needs to improve on his English a little bit, but then I think it would be fun.
I'll learn Turkish just to speak to Dennis Ontra. How about that?
Yeah,
Dennis,
good
if you
luck.
come on the podcast, I will try and learn Turkish.
Start with Duolingo tomorrow, and then we will talk in a year.
Hey, it's actually funny you mentioned that. I am using, not, and don't get me wrong, I'm not getting paid for saying this. I'm actually using Duolingo to learn Spanish. So if we ever get any Spanish writers in the podcast, I'm on unit 4 of Duolingo. So
Nice.
if we ever get any Spanish writers who want to come on the podcast, I will try and do my best.
Yes. Nice. Because I failed at Spanish in school and I never bothered to learn it afterwards.
They wouldn't
So
even
yeah.
let me try.
Okay. So I wish you a great summer break, Keelan, and maybe we'll do something silly season again because there's so much to talk about. But yeah, I wish you a great summer break and see you all again in Silverstone. Goodbye.
Likewise, Leo. Goodbye, everybody. I will see you in 5 weeks.